I'm Mark Callan, Mr. Saltwater Tank, coming to you on behalf of SaltwaterAquarium.com. And this is Mr. Saltwater Tank, RUF, Raw, Uncut, First Impressions, the show where I call it as I see it with a product that I haven't seen before. Today, we're talking about the Finnex STE line of heaters. These heaters have a built-in controller, and they come from 200 watts all the way up to 800 watts, which is what I'm looking at today. So that's the box. What's inside the box? This is why this is a raw and uncut show. I don't edit that out. We have the heating element. Now, if you're looking at this going, wow, that's really big, it's because, again, this is the 800 watt model. It goes down to a 200 watt if you're looking for something more compact. This is hardwired into the controller. Controller has a 110 plug, and then it has a hardwired in temperature sensor. So, a bunch of stuff hardwired here. The first thing that jumps out at me is the heating element is hardwired into the controller. Two thoughts on that. Look, from a manufacturing standpoint and safety standpoint, I get it. There's not a plug to worry about water intrusion. Certainly there's no like 110 plug that the heater's plugging into, which is good. From a user standpoint, especially me thinking about cord wrangling it and making this pretty, if I put this end in my sump, then I've got this controller with plugs hardwired into it. I then have to snake this thing around wherever I'm going to put it into my control panel, wherever I'm going to mount this thing. So I can't like unscrew this, the heating element at the base, put it in, route the cable, and then plug it back in here. I've got to pass this whole thing through any grommet. If I have that kind of cord wrangling on my controller setup, controller board, whatever you want to call it, I've got to route this whole gangle of things to cord wrangling. Now that's not bad. It doesn't make the product bad to me. It's just something that I'm thinking about because I'm not just thinking about setting this thing up and tossing it on the ground. Don't do that. How can I make this pretty? Well, I've got to wrangle this too. But look, for what we're giving up with that, to have this thing hardwired, so it's going to prevent water intrusion, okay, I'll give it to them. I get it. Plugs hardwired too. Looks like there's about 10 foot of cord here so we can keep the power far away from the water, which is a good thing around an aquarium. You don't want water next to or near your electronics. Then we have the temperature probe here, which is hardwired into the controller, and it comes with a snazzy suction cup. So this is nice because you don't want to just pitch the temperature sensor down in your sump and then walk away. Mount this thing by suction cupping it to the sump, and then I would take it a step further and then zip tie the cord somewhere upline so that if you yank on something underneath your tank, like when you're trying to cord wrangle, you're like, where's this cord come from? And you're going, because you know that happens. You don't accidentally pull this out of the water. But I like that they give us a suction cup to mount it. I would again take it a step further and zip tie that thing so it's secure. Okay, so it has a built-in controller, and according to Finnex, this has dual relays in there, which makes it more reliable than a standard heater. According to Finnex, standard heater failure rate's about 1 in 1,000. Most of the time they fail because the relay that turns the heater on that's inside the heater fails and then it gets stuck on. Since this has dual relays, that cuts the failure factor down. They said, the Finnex says the potential failure rate of these guys is about 1 in a million because it has the dual relays. If one fails, the other one takes over. So that is nice. So we have everything that we need out of the box. It gives us some redundancy because of the dual relays here, and we have temperature sensing that we can make remote from the heater. Here's a tip. You're setting this up in your tank, don't put the temperature sensor downstream from the heater. For example, let's say this is your sump. Water comes in here through your filter socks, goes through it, comes to this end, and goes up to the return pump. Take the heater section, the heater, put it in the return pump section, take the temperature probe, put it down near the filter socks. That way, you're not sensing the water after the heater, which could give it an arbitrarily high reading. So, heater goes after the temperature sensor. That being said, let me plug this thing in. Let's see how easy it is to use. I'm going to pause the camera while I undo some twist ties here and put it in your tank, because Finnex was very clear. If you turn this thing on outside the tank, it can damage it and cause a fuse to blow in here, which is going to make this thing permanently inoperable. So when you go to set it up, make sure you get the heating element in the water before you plug this thing in. Let's go. Okay, heating elements in the tank, temperature sensor is in the tank. feel like I'm Doc Brown in Back to the Future. Let's give this thing a go. Got it plugged in. The controller lights up, gives us the current temperature reading. Red LED on top lets us know that it's heating. If I want to change the temp, press the power button, flashes, this is where it's set. Ooh, 81, my kind of temperature, nice and balmy. Press it again, up or down, wherever you want it to go. I'm gonna set it at 77. Press it one more time, it's set. Current temp is 73. This thing's dialed in. Now it's heating, and I like the LED to let me know that it is heating. I don't have to look in my sump and be like, can't see the heating tube, what's going on? I'm gonna mount this thing above my sump or in my control cabinet. One look, and it lets me know that this thing's heating. Now, keep in mind, this thing runs for 30 minutes at a time, and then it turns itself off as a safety to prevent it from potentially overheating. So if you're using this thing and you set it to say 80, and it's telling you 74, and after 30 minutes you notice the light's off, it's done that 5-minute shutdown. So keep that in mind. Overall though, this is very easy to use. I like that it has dual relays built in, so we have some redundancy, some backups there that can never hurt, especially with a heater. Sure, I would like to have a waterproof plug here to take the heating element out. But look, I understand why they did that. I'm willing to give them that. The other thing, which I'm just remembering, is the tube has a plastic guard on it, which is nice to keep any cables or anything away from the heater. Now, you shouldn't have fish near the heater, especially if you have a sump, but you don't want any cables or anything touching that, which could then get heated up by the heating element and cause them to melt. So we have a nice package here, which has some built-in backup steps without needing a controller right out of the box. Now, for those of you that have a controller, not gonna hurt if you take the power plug of the Finnex heater controller here and plug it into your controller and let the controller manage the Finnex. Now, what I would do is, let's say this thing sets to 77, I'm gonna have the outlet on my controller have a wider range than this thing. So I would have the controller turn it off when the tank temp gets to 79, and then I would let it even kind of almost as a somewhat of a constant on. Set the on temp for 77. That way, pretty much you're handing over control to the Finnex, but if things get too hot, then the controller is gonna turn it off. But for the most part, we're letting the Finnex controller, the heater itself, run the show, which is what I want. I don't want the controller to turn this thing on and off. I want this to have control, but I do want to be able to override this if this thing somehow gets stuck on and then stays on. The controller is going to have secondary temp over it. But if you don't have a controller, then this has some built-in backups for you, which is really nice. Compact system, easy to use. Remember, it goes from 200 all the way to 800. So we've got a range of heating options here. I also just noticed the whole thing is black, which is cool because the thing about black is it fades from view. If you look at something long enough and it's black, it disappears from your view. So if you're looking underneath your sump, you're looking at your control panel, this thing is eventually going to fade from view. All you're going to see is the red digital temp reading. Look, I'm being super picky here, but that's cool to me. Like, I'm nerding out on that from a cord wrangling control panel standpoint. Nice, easy to use package. Like that it's a titanium element with the guard on it, with the temp sensor built in. This is much better than just letting the heater run on its own. And for those of you that are kind of tech phobic, you don't need any app to run this thing. Plug it in, dial in the temperature like I showed you, and you're good to go.